Hey, hello everyone. We are here getting ready. We haven't started yet, but Sapna is here with me. Hello, Sapna. How are you?
Hi, Paulino. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing great and enjoying this Thursday. We already have two live sessions and a networking sessions, and now we're about to have a live session with you. So I will see everyone in here in a few minutes. Is that okay, Sabna?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, so don't go anywhere. We'll start soon.
Okay.
We are back and we are live for you at the 2018 Online Teachers Summit. And now we have Sapna Sehgal, and we are here to talk about what are we going to talk about, Sapna?
We are going to, we're here to talk about answering your questions that you had for me and about creating materials and using them for your lessons. So,
Perfect. And if you haven't seen her interview yet, it's still available. Remember, all the free sessions are available until April 7, or the advanced sessions if you upgrade to your premium pass. So, Sabna, let's start a little bit with your background and your story. We have a lot of teachers at the Online Teacher Summit who are either thinking about becoming online teachers, they are either transitioning into the classroom to online. Some of us, like you and I, we do both. So it's great
mhm.
to hear examples of how this all works for different people. So how does it work for you?
Well, I actually started teaching online when I moved from Canada, and some of my old students that I had wanted to to continue taking lessons with me even when I moved countries, and online was just such a great way to do that.
Do you need a drink of water?
I think so.
You
One second.
do, no problem. Get some water. So, people, we
Okay.
are live. This is real TV. Well, we're not on TV, but we are we are broadcasting live, and this,
Yes, we are.
yes, we are
Okay.
definitely no problem. So, you were
Thank you.
saying,
Sorry, I was saying I started teaching online first when I moved from Canada to England, and a lot of my students wanted to kind of follow me. So I started online sessions with them, and yeah, and it's a great mix, and it kind of adds some flexibility. So it's totally fine to be doing both at the same time, or to transition from one to the other.
how do you organize your time between, or I would say mainly your schedule to have both? Do you have a specific dates and times when you leave it open for online teaching? How does it work?
It actually that really depends on my students. I get requests, and I just try to mold my schedule to theirs as much as possible. And if you're teaching internationally, sometimes that means you're teaching really late at night where you are, or really early in the morning. But then the plus side of that is you get a lot of diverse students from all over the world. So I find it really exciting.
Great. What's
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about the kinds of students that you're working with right now?
Right now, I'm working with a lot of university students online um, who are applying to graduate programs, and a lot of English as a second language business people who want to improve their vocabulary or their speaking skills for their jobs. Yeah, so
And
I
a
do a lot of
question that usually many teachers, especially who are starting, ask, how are these students finding you?
A lot of my work is through referrals, to be honest. So, once you start to get a client base, I would say start with something like Verbling or italki, or one of the platforms where you can kind of advertise yourself, and you'll be surprised how quickly people who like your work refer you to others. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's just referrals.
Yeah, and so Italki Verblin, those are marketplaces where you need to apply and have
Mhm.
a profile there. And if that doesn't work for you or you're not interested in that, another way would be ask your family and friends. Do you know someone who might be interested in taking lessons? This is something that I'm doing right now, at least for your first few students.
Mhm.
Or if you have students that you taught in the past in the classroom, you can ask them, hey, do you know anyone? And ask those kind of referrals, not of the people
Right.
you're teaching right now or people you taught in the past to start having your first few clients. Okay, so let's get to some of the questions that people had. Some of those questions are specific about your interview. And
Yep.
then for those of you watching, if you have more questions, please post them in the chat box, And if there are other questions that come up about online teaching or materials in general, also post them there. So let's see. We have Sabine asking, do you have more recommendations for games?
Yes, I do. So I know in my discovery session, I mentioned speaking board games. So the first thing I would suggest is finding or creating as many different types of speaking board games as you can. There's a few in my free printables library that you can use. But that's kind of the first thing I would suggest because it really gets students talking. And I don't know if you've seen the trending kind of Pinterest pin that's called Conversation Jenga. That's
I
kind of a
haven't.
game.
No,
No, it's a quite a cool game. Are you familiar with Jenga?
I am. I
The
am.
yeah, so you kind of it's for anyone who doesn't know, it's one of those puzzle games where you pull out pieces and try not to make the tower fall. So you put conversation topics on the Jenga pieces, and so when a student pulls the Jenga piece, they have to then spend 30 seconds or whatever time you'd like to give them to talk about that topic. So it kind of makes it fun with a game. Yeah, and other than that, I use story cubes a lot. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with those. They're like little dice that you can use. Uh, you can use little pictures on the dice and create stories. Works really well for kids as well because they love to create and be imaginative. So
Okay,
yeah.
perfect. And Diana asked on the chat box, Sabna, can you tell us a bit about can you tell us a bit of the different kinds of materials you have experience making or creating?
Okay. Well, I do create a few organizational templates that I talked about in my discovery session as well. So those are just to kind of get you organized, get you started.
And by the way, we
Uh,
do have the link in the chat for those who are
mhm.
joining us live, but that link is also on your presenters page. So
Yes.
if you're here with us live, you can see the link in the chat. If not, you can also find it on the presenters page.
Yeah. So that's the first kind of thing. And then board games, I tend to make a lot of board game type worksheets and short story worksheets that people can use with different types of media. So short stories or short videos. Sometimes TED Talks. I have an ebook on TED Talks because I really like to use them. So there's a couple of free TED Talk lessons in my printables library as well. Um, yeah, so it's quite a mixed bunch because I do like to be creative and kind of give different students have different likes and different ways of learning, and so sometimes one student will really engage with TED Talks, whereas another one isn't really interested in that sort of material. So you kind of have to be flexible.
Great. And
Yeah.
we'll talk more about the different kinds of materials. But we have the opportunity to have you live with us, and people are interested in all your many facets. So we'll go
Mhm.
back to games and materials, but we do have a
Okay.
question from, let's see, it's from Jess Gardner, and she's interested to learn more about your marketing background. She says,
Mhm.
I heard Paulino mention that you have a background in marketing, and you'll correct me if I misspoke. But and she says, I'm debating between taking a marketing class or paying for coaching to help me with my business. Do you have any suggestions one way or the other? Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, great question. Yes, I do have a marketing background. So my first degree was actually in marketing, and then I worked for 5 years, kind of in different industries. And what I would say is it really depends what stage of your business or your online kind of teaching that you're at. So if you're right at the beginning, let's say you don't have a brand name yet, you're trying to learn some very basic marketing concepts, I would suggest a class because that's something you can kind of maybe an online course or a lot of bloggers have kind of like website marketing type courses that you can take that are a bit cheaper. So I would kind of start there, and then once you have a better idea of what your logo is, what your brand is, maybe then hire a coach to help you with some of those kind of more detailed services because um, I'd say it also depends on your budget because marketing coaching can be quite expensive as well. So
Okay,
yeah.
so it depends on where you
Yeah.
are in your journey. Okay,
Yes,
awesome.
exactly.
Thank you for that answer. And Joanne Nicholson from Glasgow, she says, "Hi, Sabna. Thanks for the good points
Glasgow.
in your interview. Can I ask you about the semester long plan you suggested as a way to
Mhm.
address the students' goals? Do you produce this and put it into action only if the students agrees to a longer plan and pays part or upfront cost, or do you produce this plan for all students?"
Well, that's a great question. Well, what tends to happen is I create the semester lesson plan for all my students. Although, if someone's hiring me for a couple of classes, we would just kind of go through their goals and then have really focused classes on what they need. But for my students who are around all semester, I do a whole semester long plan, and I've never really had the problem where I planned it for someone and they didn't make it through the semester. Because I find once you kind of sit down with them, show them the plan, they're ready to commit, and it kind of like reinforces it for them too that they can do this and they will get somewhere by the end of the semester.
And
Yeah.
we do have a guest speaker today. Would you like would you like to introduce?
Okay.
Yes, it's your dog. It would just pop up around you.
Oh no. Did she? Okay. Yeah.
Which is great. Which is great.
We are
Peop
definitely live.
we are digital live, and it's great. I think it happened during our recording, but
Yes.
it's awesome.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we do work at home, and we were talking, I think, in one of the networking sessions that people, even though we are in this environment which is a little colder because there's a screen between you and the student, you can also let them a little bit in your home and
Yeah.
show the human aspect of it, and share some of your life in a way, not to be
Yeah.
friends, but just to show that you're a human as well. And
Yeah.
also, I find it sometimes that it's very useful to incorporate some of your live experiences into what you're teaching. So you mentioned you have a marketing background. Did you ever
Yes.
had a chance to incorporate that experience into actual lessons?
Yes, actually, I do that quite a bit, especially for students. So I'm living here in Barcelona, and a lot of students are looking for English as a second language that they can use at work. So I have had students that work in companies and are looking for kind of like business knowledge in English. So that's kind of how that fits in really nicely. And also, I mentioned I teach in person at universities as well, and I've kind of just to put something creative out there, had students work in groups to make business plans, and they kind of it's different to the normal style that they have here in Spain for teaching at universities. So they get quite excited about it, and yeah, it's great to kind of mix both backgrounds that I have.
Cool. Cool. And talking about
Yeah.
excitement, a lot of teachers are excited about the ideas of using games in the classroom because
Yeah.
usually it's one of the tools we have that we can see the motivation in the students and the excitement they might
Yeah.
not have when we're dealing with grammar, for example.
Yeah.
So, Margarita says, "Hi, Sabna. I would like to know about the gamification in the online classroom. Could you
Mhm.
expand on that a bit or tell us a good website, books about the subject? Thanks."
Yeah, yeah, perfect. That's a really great question because gamification is a huge topic these days. It's kind of like a trending topic. One of the games I use a lot is called Linguapolis. So if you look on my blog, I've got a blog post about that. And one of my good friends, Vita Kogan, and her business partner kind of put that game together. And I find it so useful because it's just kind of gets people engaged in real life situations. So that's kind of a board game that I use. And as for gamification, there's a book called Reality is Broken, which is I haven't got a chance to read it yet, but I've read a few summaries and it's on my list. Um, And basically, the concept of the book is that to make kind of life more gamified. So to make everyday tasks kind of more fun and use gamification in everyday tasks. So it can also be used in teaching. Um, so for example, if your students, one of my students is really into interior design, so there's a lot of kind of gamification you can do where you kind of say, okay, we're going to design your dream home using English vocabulary, using um, you know vocabulary that might be kind of higher level for them, and creating a plan online. You know,
Okay.
so
Great.
yeah.
One of the type of games that I like are in real life are the breakout rooms. Have you heard of the, or have you ever been to a breakout room?
Not yet, but yeah, I have heard of them. Yeah.
For those of
Yeah.
you who don't know, it's this room that you get in and you have to solve all kinds of puzzles to get out of the room. That's why it's called
Right.
breakout room. And I went to a couple here in the city in Minneapolis where I live, and then I said, I can do this in Spanish for my Spanish students. In
Yeah.
fact, there is a movement called the Breakout EDU movement, and a lot of teachers um, do this in the classroom.
Mhm.
They design activities usually not to get out of the room because you can keep them inside of the room legally, but their version is you have to open locks to open a box, and
Yeah.
inside the box maybe there is a prize. And so I did this in real life with some of my local students, and I'm trying to think of ways to incorporate it into my online lessons. So if anyone out
Yeah.
there is into puzzles and games and know more about Breakout EDU and would like to collaborate, I would like to um, think, put our minds together and talk more about the, designing Breakout EDU or breakout rooms online, so like
Yeah.
digital rooms or games. But we have more questions about creation,
Okay.
materials creation. And Diana says, can you give us ideas for making materials to practice speaking skills for beginners? So
Mhm.
specifically for someone on a lower level.
Yeah, I would say that you would need to kind of adapt something like a speaking board game so that it's very simplified. Um, so, you might not be speaking for 30 seconds about a topic. You might just be forming a sentence. Um, so you could kind of put together a speaking board game like that. Another game that I've had a lot of success with is Memory, actually. So if you're familiar with the game, it's the one that kids play usually where you match two cards. So I actually taught a beginner, absolute beginner adult class with memory game, and at first they were kind of hesitant to play this children's game, but then they got really into it, and there were faces um, on the cards, so you had to match the different faces. And we had really basic vocabulary like hair and eyes, and like facial vocabulary or colors. Um, and so you can kind of make that more interesting and fun by putting it with something like memory, I would say.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. And um, there are ways to create that kind of flipping memory games with PowerPoint or
Hmm.
Google Docs. We
Yeah.
won't get into that now, but just for people who like that kind of activities, to you can Google, and if you have it on, let's say, Google Docs, it's a little easier to share
Yeah.
online for your online students, but definitely
Exactly.
you can use in the classroom. Another question we have here, again, still about creating materials, but more about the process.
Hmm.
Um, Sarah wants to know how many hours, more or less, do you work on extra materials for each student? And in general, um, what you already created, did it take a lot of time? Do you do it alone?
Okay, so well, that really depends. I mean, there. I try to create materials that can be reused for a lot of different students, that are really adaptable. So it really depends what the students want. I mean, for example, if they are preparing for one of the Cambridge exams, for example, um, I might have a bunch of students preparing for those, and it does take a few hours to put together those materials. But then every time I have someone using the exam, I have 3 or 4 worksheets ready for them. And every month I spend a few hours putting together the printables, the new printables from my printables library. And yeah, it does take time, but then I'm also using those for my lessons, and I'm using them again and again. Um, so I find the more you create, the more you have available for yourself, and the more practice you have, the easier it is to adapt those lessons to different levels. Um, so yeah, it really depends on your students' goals and how much time you can dedicate to it.
And what's your different type of material to create? I know you have your templates, yes, because
Hmm.
that saves you time, and that's something
Yeah,
we talked about in your interview. You also talked about finding resources,
yeah.
and I have a couple of questions about that coming up. But
Okay,
what's your
perfect.
favorite type of activity to create? Because we
Mhm.
try to find whatever works for the students, but
Yeah.
sometimes we have our favorites. What's yours?
I like to create, oh, I have to go with two. Film studies. I really like to create film studies, because I find students get really engaged with even short films. So the film studies and board games. I'm just always amazed how much fun students have with board games. So even if it's a one piece of paper, kind of a JPEG that you share online with your online students, it can really, really get the class going. So those are my two favorites.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So again, in your interview, we talked about also finding materials
Hmm.
because you can't create everything for you. It would just take too
Yeah.
much time. So my couple of questions are, one is, what can you do when you find some, you need to find materials according to your students in general, but are there any strategies to individualize the experience? So take a
Mm.
material you find on a website, the BBC or something, and
Yeah.
make it interesting, or make it interesting, or make it individualized for one particular student. So how do you
Yeah.
use that material?
Okay. I do that a lot with textbooks. So, some of my favorite textbooks to use for English teaching are the English File series. But I do find some of their activities are very generic. And so I take the grammar activities and I change some of the questions so that they're more relevant to what the students like. So, once you get to know your students, what their hobbies are and what kind of themes they like. So I tend to change kind of the grammar activities so they're talking more about that. And then also I do a lot of novel studies, especially with the teenagers and kind of older children that I work with. And I find it's really important to make sure that they like the book, so it's really important to understand their likes and dislikes before you go and adapt, um, a video lesson or a short story lesson or a novel study to them. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we're coming up with the end of these live sessions. If you have any more questions, or if we miss something, please post them in the Facebook group under
Mhm.
Sapna's picture or post, and Sabna and I can try to answer them there. Sometimes online everything goes a little faster, but or we don't have the time to look it up,
Yeah.
because, like for example, she's mentioning some resources, and right now we're trying to focus on you who are right here.
Yeah.
But if you post it on the Facebook group, then we can, with more time, look up those resources and share them with you. But I didn't want to leave you, Sabna, without asking you about what's going on in your life as an entrepreneur, because
Okay.
I think all we have this experience or this opportunity at the Online Teacher Summit to listen from all of you speakers who do have multiple projects, and these are great examples that entrepreneurs are doing. So, what's going on with you? What are you working on? Something
Mhm.
that our audience might be interested in? Let us know.
Yeah, so my latest product would be my Profitable Organized English Teacher course, which is an online course that you can take at your own pace, and you kind of can go through and learn some more tips and tricks for setting up your own either online or in-person tutoring business. And I do have a coupon code for you. So if you use the coupon code Online Teacher Summit, you can get 60% off the course. So I love to have as many of you as possible come join me for that. And there's a Facebook group that's exclusive for my students on that course, and that way I can jump in there and personally help you with any sort of concerns you have or questions.
Okay, so it's Online Teacher Summit, all one word.
Yes.
That should be easy to remember for
Yeah.
participants of the
Yeah.
Online Teacher Summit. And where can people find this information about this course?
Okay, so if you just go to teachingcove.com, or if you go to courses.teachingcove.com, it'll be right there. So
Okay, they
um, I can provide a link maybe in the Facebook group or just in the chat here, if that's easier.
yeah, yes, we'll do that. I just wanted to, there it
Yeah.
is. I'll just put the link to courses,
Okay.
and
Perfect.
the course is the Profitable Organized Teaching. There, I'll
Yeah.
post the link right away so that people who are here and want, since they already heard about it and want to check it out,
Yeah.
they can do that. So they can use
Excellent.
the
Okay.
coupon
Mm-hmm.
um, Online Teacher Summit. There it is in
Yes.
the chat. So if you just heard of it and want to check it out, it's there for you. And yeah, let's continue this conversation in the Facebook group because
Yeah. Sounds
we
great.
I know that we could be talking about creating materials and ideas, and there are so many tools and ideas. So if there's something you heard in this presentation and you want to know more about, bring your question to the Facebook group. Sapna, thank you so much for taking some time of your day to be here with us and share your experience.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's been great to hear everyone's questions and see if I can help. So,
Perfect, perfect. Thank you very much.
okay.
And for everyone else, please remember we have one more networking session that you can join today. I'm going to try to be quick and find the link. I should have this prepared before. Paulino, why haven't you prepared this? Um, the link to join the or to register the networking session we have today at 4 p.m. Central Time. So if you are available, so that's in about 1 hour from now. If you are available, join us for the networking session. The link is right now in the chat. Networking group at 4 p.m. Central Time. And that's another opportunity to ask specific questions with other Online Teacher Summit participants. And it's just an informal discussion. You can come with a coffee, you can come with a drink, you can come in your pajamas. It doesn't matter. It's really relaxed, and we all just get to know each other and discuss all these topics that we're all learning about. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. If I don't see you in the networking group, we'll see you tomorrow.